Today we're here to see Nathaniel Snow's senior exhibition. For those of you that haven't sat through one, welcome, and you're about to be sort of entertained and learn something new maybe. The panelists we are the 7 panelists, and what's going to happen is I'm going to give Nathaniel the floor. He'll have 15 minutes in which to make his presentation, and after 15 minutes I'll sort of give him a signal that 5 minutes remain, and then at the end of the 20 minutes we panelists will deliberate. We'll ask the audience members to please and Nathaniel to leave the room. Before that, if we or you have questions, there'll be time for that. And then at the end of that period, we'll call you back in with the results. Okay? All right. Any questions before you,
go?
Happy to go. Okay. Set.
So thank you all for coming today. My name's Nathaniel Snow, and this is my senior exhibition project on competitive match shooting, which, as someone mentioned, does not have to do with shooting matchsticks. I've heard that already. So this is about competitive match shooting, competing against other people for score. So because competitive shooting is a very controversial topic, I figured I'd jump right in with the Second Amendment. And one important thing to remember is that rifles that are used in competitions are never called weapons. They're tools. We call them rifles. We call them weapons occasionally, but they really aren't weapons. They're the tool that we use. But the Second Amendment of the Constitution states that a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state, and the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Which is very important to consider with this. It's our essential tool. We can't do it without these rifles. And if that right is taken away, then we can no longer shoot. So competitive shooting, what is it? According to Wikipedia, it's a shooting sport involving tests of proficiency such as speed and accuracy, and using various types of guns, firearms, air rifles, bows and arrows. And that's according to Wikipedia, which is not the most reliable source, but seemed to have the best definition to explain it. So some of the history of rifle shooting. It all began with Egyptian arrow shooting. And they would shoot arrows for competition where they'd get prizes such as food or necessary tools. And then these 2 National Guardsmen, Colonel William C. Church and Captain George W. Wingate, noticed that Civil War marksmen had very low scores. They were dying, they couldn't hit their targets. And so they said, oh, let's train them to shoot accurately. And so we're going to have these competitions to see who can shoot the best. And that's how we're going to pick our sharpshooters. And then they have the NRA, which was founded in 1871. Again, it aimed at helping people with better scores and educating the general public on the use of firearms. And then competitive shooting became an Olympic event in 1896, and it's been an Olympic event ever since. They shoot all different types of weapons at different ranges. So some of the various competitions. There is 3-gun match, which involves 3 different guns, pistol, shotgun, and rifle, and they compete over various courses. There's high power shooting, which is what I did. It uses a rifle at longer range, usually at 100 to 1,200 yards. And then there is IDPA and USPSA, which are both more defense courses. You have an actual life course. You got to shoot different targets in different directions using IDPA's pistol, and I believe USPSA is either rifle or shotgun. It's more of a long barrel. So I went out to Guns and Ammo, and I found that they had some competition tips for new shooters, anybody starting out. And so this guy had 8 tips. The first one was don't make assumptions. Attend a match and see what you need for yourself. Don't assume your gear. Go see what it's actually all about. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. Practice doesn't always make perfect. You can watch experienced shooters, and that's often the best way to learn, because you may be practicing and practicing, but you're not doing something right. And if you went and you watched somebody who knew how to do it right, you might pick up on a few things. Don't be too quick to buy your gear. Go to a match with a notebook. See what other people are using. You can often learn a lot that way. And they're always helpful. When I went, everybody was always helpful. They'd say, oh, you can do this, and if you do this, it'll help. And they'd let me borrow gear and see what it was all about. And don't let nerves get the better of you. Everybody gets nervous, and it's something you got to learn to deal with. So it's really, you got to calm yourself down. If you're nervous, you can't shoot well. Don't always expect to win your first match. There's always going to be somebody out there who shoots a little better, but look at that failure as a challenge to do better. Competitive shooting, while it is a group sport, you're competing against other people, you're also competing against yourself and trying to always do better. That's one of the important things to learn. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Everybody who goes to these matches are very friendly. There's a shooting community out there. They'll help you out, show you gear, help you set it up. And don't be surprised if your competition score is lower than your practice score. Happens to everyone. The nerves of the competition, the stress, it gets to you. Your scores go down. And you also have to be mentally strong. Shooting is a very mental sport. You have to calm yourself down before the match or your nerves are going to get to you. And there's a strong mental component in that you have to focus on what you're doing. And some of the best shooters are actually those who are good at meditation or yoga, because they can calm themselves and center themselves around their shot and not worry about what's going on around them, which is really hard when you have loud guns being fired on both sides of you. So the learning process, when I started this project, first I had to find a topic. And so I thought, oh, I'll do scuba diving. I've seen a lot of those. I really like being on the water. Be great for me. And then turns out Diver Ed wasn't doing scuba diving. So I said, well, I'm also interested in rifle shooting, which posed a new challenge for me because I have some background knowledge on rifle shooting. I'm a member of the Hamden Junior Rifle Team. We shoot 22 at 50 feet. And so I had to find some new learning with that. And my new learning translated for me to high-power rifle, which is something I've never done before. I've used 22s, which are a relatively low-power rifle, at short range. So a high-power rifle is any rifle with the ability to shoot accurately past 100 yards. So there's F-class shooting, which is what these guns are, and they use scopes and rests on both ends. They're very accurate. The match I went to, I was watching the F-class guys. They would put 20 shots in a tennis ball at 600 yards. They'd hit it every time. Granted, you can't see the tennis ball, you have to have a bigger target, but that was the size of their groups. So then there's also service rifle, which is more like what the military uses. It's a very specific rifle. It has to have a 20-inch barrel. It has to be very specific twist. All the guards and stuff, it has to be fixed. So it's very specific, but it's a military-grade weapon. And that's what I shot. I used a service rifle, which was another new experience for me because I've used bolt-action rifle before, but I've never really used an AR-15, which is what they are. Service rifle, which is semi-automatic too. Took some getting used to. So the equipment, there's all kinds of different equipment you need. You need a jacket, a glove, a sling, a spotting scope, ammunition, and a scorebook. And I actually brought in my jacket today. This is what I use. And they have padding on the shoulders so that you're not taking as much of a hit from the rifle. And there's also padding on the elbows, so when you're laying down you can get a lot of grip. It's a very heavy jacket, and that material helps keep you steady if you're standing up, and it helps to steady your body. It's an advantage you're allowed to use. And you also need safety glasses and earplugs. Safety is very important to us, and there's a lot of stuff being thrown around. You don't want it to get in your eye. And of course the loud gunshots. You don't want to lose your hearing. So we're required to wear hearing protection. And if you want to learn more how to get started, this website was very helpful. It's just nra.org, how to get started, high-power rifle. I learned a lot from that. It taught me just about how to get started, how to get into it, what I needed. So my mentor was Bob Lermond, and he's a range coach at Hamden Rifle and Pistol Club. And he mentored me in small bore when I started up a couple years ago and switched to left-handed. He was very helpful because I'm left-eye dominant. I had to switch to left-handed shooting, even though I've shot right-handed before. And then he was on the range the day I went for my match and helped me shoot high power. So at a match there's 3 stages. There's the pits, there's scoring, and then there's shooting. So I started off in the pits, which you can kind of see it's this concrete bunker down at the end of the range. So you're down at the end, people are shooting over your head, and you raise this target up, and it goes up, and then you wait for the shot, and they'll shoot it, and you can see the bullet hit the bank. And then you got to pull the target down really quickly because they're waiting on you at the top of the range. And then you plug the hole. There's 2 plugs. You plug one where the bullet went in, and then you plug another around the edge depending on the score. And then you raise the target back up. And when you plug it, somebody's at the other end with a spotting scope waiting to score it. So I don't know if you can really see this picture, but it shows the concrete bunker, and it's basically a wall that's built up between you and the shooters so that you don't get hit. So it's very scary when you first go down to think that you're being shot at by a dozen well-trained sharpshooters. You're down at the end, just waiting for the bullet. So next I went to scoring, and to score you need a spotting scope and a scorecard and a pencil. And that's my actual scorecard that was at the match. That's mine. And so we shoot 3 sets. You score them. So what you'll need, a scope, a pencil, and a scorecard. And you watch the shot. And if you actually look down through the scope, I learned while I was there, you can see the bullet fly. Because at 600 yards there's a couple of second flight time. And so the sun, you can actually see the trace of the bullet, which is really cool. It'd go up and then you could watch it go back down. It looked like it was going to miss every time. And then somehow it hit and you'd watch the target go down. And then you wait for that person to put the target back up at the end, and you just mark whatever their score is. You mark it on your card. So then shooting. And this is where I really got into a lot of new learning with a different weapon. So that's me shooting AR. And we were prone shooting, which means we were lying down. We don't do offhand at 600 yards. It's too inaccurate. And so we did 3 sets of 20 shots in 20 minutes. So we fired 60 shots total. And the aiming, and this was very different. I'm used to peep sights, which is a circle on the rear and a circle on the front. These are a circle on the rear and then posts in the front. So the center post is where you want your target, right on the top. And that's how you sight it in, and that's where you aim. But then there's all sorts of adjustments. At 600 yards, everything comes into account. Mirage, wind, humidity, even the sun. The higher the sun is, the more you have to adjust your shot. And one of the guys who was very helpful with that was Scott Folsom. He was one of the other shooters at the range. And he kept coming up to me and he'd say, well, if you adjust like this, it'll help your shot. Because the wind will knock the bullet off by a few inches. The mirage can adjust your aim, how the target looks to you. And the humidity and the sun just affect the trajectory, how fast it's flying. So these are my results. This was posted after the match. And I was second to last out of my series. But there's all different kinds of rifles. There's the F class, which are these scores. And some of these guys can shoot 200 out of 200, perfect scores. And then there's service rifle, which is what I shot. And then there's match rifle, which is very similar to service rifle, except the sights are different. They allow for a few different modifications. The sights are the main one that everybody uses. So I have a copy of that. I'll hand around. Started off with the panel. But these are just the actual scores, so you can read them. So shooting is a life skill. Rifle marksmanship is a sports skill involving an athlete, a rifle, and a target. I found that quote. I really liked it. So you get to meet people of all ages. That was one of the great things. I was by far the youngest shooter at the range. I was the only junior member. And I got to meet a lot of people who I never normally would talk to. And they were all very friendly and willing to help me out. It's also good for mental concentration. You have to concentrate on your shot. Like I said, people who are good at yoga or meditation are very good at this because they can calm themselves down and they can make their shot accurately. It's also good for physical agility. There's also a strong physical component, being able to hold the rifle accurately, being able to stay there. You have to lie down and hold the rifle up for 20 minutes. It takes some effort. It's also good for self-defense. I found this quote, the average response time of a 911 call is 23 minutes. The response time of a 357 is 1,400 feet per second. The bullet's going to get there a lot faster than that 911 call. Some people don't like guns. That's fine, they call 911. Other people learn how to use them accurately. They can defend themselves. There's a much higher chance for survival. The enemy has less time in your house. It's also good for hunting. You can get food. This is how people used to live. They lived off the land. They'd hunt and gather. Well, if you can't shoot, you can't hunt. Therefore, you don't have any meat. You're more likely to starve. So, how is competitive shooting an important life skill? I wanted to come back to my essential question and reflect on it. So, I can use my knowledge to help others learn how to shoot. That was very important to me. I wanted to spread what I know, share my knowledge. I can educate my peers on the safe use of firearms. It's one of the things we strive for, is to be able to use them safely. And as a result, we've had no injuries. We have 8 junior shooters on the team. None of us have been injured other than the occasional paper cut from a target. Whereas you get into these people playing soccer, you get kicked in the shins a lot. Football, there's a lot of concussions. It's actually one of the safer sports out there. Firearms are only dangerous when used in an unsafe way. If you're trained how to use them, which I have now been trained how to use ARs as well as small bore, you can use them safely and you're not going to get hurt. I've also learned how to conduct myself around all kinds of firearms, which will allow me to use them effectively if I ever have to use them in a self-defense situation. It's very important to me that I can be effective with my use of the firearm so I don't hurt myself or others who I don't intend to. So my next steps, I'd like to continue high power shooting. I had a great time at the range. It's very important to me. And that's something I continue to do throughout my life. At 600 yards, if you go up to Fort Kent, you can get out past a mile, which might be fun someday. Definitely not now. I'd also like to build an AR-15 service rifle, which is essential to shoot high power for me. I can't keep borrowing weapons. I borrowed from Dave Dow, who was a member at the range. And his weapon worked great for me, but I can't continue to use that all the time. So I'd like to start and build one. And that's all the different pieces that go into it. It's a very complicated setup, at least from that point of view, but it's actually a pretty simple rifle as far as they go. And I'd also like to get into an IDPA or USPSA and learn to shoot other kinds of weapons. Start to learn about every different kind so I can effectively communicate my knowledge to others on not just the ones I know, but about anything. So I'd like to thank the audience. You guys were great today. You listened. The panel, taking time out of your day, come see these, especially our community members. Thank you. Mr. P and Ms. Dillon, they were my senior X teachers. They helped a lot, pushing us through this. My mentor, Bob Lermond, and Dave Dow, who loaned me gear. And the whole Hamden High Power team, which they were very helpful. Showed me everything I need to know. Always willing to share their knowledge. And this is my works cited and pictures from those websites. Does anyone have any questions?
Some questions?
Sure, I do. I just, out of interest, have you thought of competing in biathlons?
I've thought about it.
Really, would kind of press you to work on the calming yourself down.
Yeah, and that has a stronger physical component too. I haven't really considered it until recently, but I'm certainly thinking about it. I may start to look around when I get into college and see if I can get into some of those as a sport. I prefer shooting than other kinds of sports, but that might have a more physical component for me, which might be good. Yeah.
I have another one too.
So why don't you go through all
I
yours?
just have one more.
I have a few.
Is it common for people to build their own weapons? You mentioned rather than purchasing a weapon, the idea of building one, which would take a lot of new learning and how to put that together. But I guess I wasn't aware that people build their own, so that's new.
Well, with your standard hunting rifles and things, people usually just buy them. But these guns, they're highly customized, and every one of them is different. They look different. They have different accessories. So people will often buy different pieces. They'll buy the barrels, they'll buy the base, and then they'll add their own things onto it. As far as ARs go, there's the lower receiver, the stock, the upper receiver, and the barrels. And so you buy all those different pieces assembled. So it's not as complicated as that picture showed. There's actually 6 or 7 different pieces you put together. So it's more of a kit. And that way you can pick and choose and you can get the best stuff for you.
I have some questions. You mentioned something about small bore. What's that?
Small bore is just a smaller firearm. We use 22, which is a very short cartridge. There's not a lot of power to it, so we can shoot it indoors at 50 feet. But if you're shooting outdoors at 100 yards, that 22 isn't going to make it to the target quite as well. So we use a high power, which has more powder. The bullet moves a lot faster.
Oh, I see. And completely unrelated, how did you know you're left eye dominant? Did you have to take a sight test or something? I mean, how did they do that?
Actually, it started with archery. I'm very into archery, and I went up to get a new bow and arrow, and I said, I'm looking for a right-handed bow, and he said, well, do this for me. And you cross your hands, and then you look at something, you bring it back to your face. Mine always comes back to my left eye. So I'm left eye dominant, and so I ended up switching archery first. And then I was shooting at the range one night, and I said, well, I'm having a little trouble. The target goes blurry after a few seconds. They said, well, try switching to left-handed. And I had trouble with that because I've always been right-handed. And so I ended up taping my glasses over. So I can only see out of my left eye when I'm shooting, which is helpful. It helps a little bit with the blurriness and also with eye fatigue. A lot of people don't realize that when you try to keep one eye closed for a while, it's hard after a bit, but it's also wearing down on the rest of your physical component, which makes it harder to shoot. Getting tired.
Anyone else have any questions from them?
I'm curious, how did you get into shooting in the first place?
Actually, I'm not really sure how I got into it. We kind of went to the range one night, and
Like your parents, or?
yeah, my brother was into it. He thought he might want to, and so I kind of just tagged along, and then I started going. I had some fun. So my father, he's in the back. He's an NRA instructor, so we like to shoot.
Other questions on behalf of the panel or the audience at this point? Okay. I think with that, then we'll ask Nathaniel if you want to just duck out with the rest of the audience, please. And